Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
There they are, Brad and John, on display for everybody to see, right?
On display. Hey, I have a theory, Brad,
Uh-oh.
which is that do you think there's a chance that Dean Phillips might be related to former St. Louis media personality Guy Phillips?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, it's such a rare last name. I mean, there's nobody named Phillips.
Listen to you. Hey.
I grew up watching DB's Delight. Do you remember DB's Delight?
Well, the original version was Young Bobby Day. Do you remember that?
You know what? I don't remember that, but I Wikipedia'd it.
Yeah.
And I remember there was some other dude that hosted before. I was more the Guy Phillips era, you know?
Young Bobby Day, I worked with Young Bobby Day, the absolute positive best DJ I ever worked with.
What station was he at?
Well, he's at the old KSLQ.
KSLQ?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And
Nice.
then he mutinied and he went across the street to Stereo WK when the Bobby Hattrick thing. That's a whole crazy weird story.
Mutiny.
Yes.
A mutiny. I like that.
Well, it was a mutiny as far as our boss was concerned, but that was a whole other story. But yes, he was the most impressive guy in the world. He never ever made a mistake. Never. I mean, literally, never
That's
made
rare.
a mistake. His to the point where the running joke was we'd have to have air check sessions with the boss, and the boss would go over like our tapes of us being on the air, and Bobby was always kidding about the fact that why he didn't need to go to air check session because his every time he was on the air, everything was perfect, and it was perfect. He never made a mistake. Never. I mean, he was good, and he originally was from Kansas City, moved back to Kansas City. I guess he's retired now. But he was the original. That was the original DB's Delight. Once again, that's an era when local TV stations did local entertainment, local kid shows. That's gone.
Yeah, you would have a local show to discuss local issues.
Well, but local issues, you'd have a local, like channel.
The school kids would come in, and you know that you might see somebody from your school district on that show.
Channel 30 doesn't even have a studio in St. Louis anymore. Do you know that?
Right. Yeah, I did know that.
I mean,
that's been that way for a while.
I know, it's crazy. They have no studio in St. Louis. Now
is Bobby Day? Now is he old Bobby Day now? Did he have to drop the young? Or is he forever young?
See, there was an interesting reason because of the fact that you want to hear a little. This is nerd stuff in the radio business.
I absolutely want to hear it.
Okay, he had one of his first big jobs was at WHB in Kansas City, which at the time was a union station. He had to join AFTRA. Okay, in AFTRA, you can't have the same name as somebody else.
Oh, really?
That's the deal with the Screen Actors Guild as well too. That was the same thing. There can be no two people in Screen Actors Guild. Now it's the same union. Nobody can have the same name. So there was a Bobby Day already as in AFTRA. So they decided he wanted to be, and his real name is Robert Dietrich. He wanted to be Bobby Day. But he could not. See, that was the deal. I remember this now. He was already Bobby Day on the air, and then he got the job at WHB, and he still used the name Bobby Day, but he couldn't be Bobby Day anymore because there was another Bobby Day. So he decided to be Young Bobby Day, and we just
That's great.
We just called him YBD. So Young Bobby Day. So yeah, back in the day. And great guy, really nice guy, down to earth, couldn't be a nicer guy.
But do you think that if we gave one of his air checks to Egbert, I bet Egbert would just tear it apart?
No, there was nothing to tear apart. He was perfect.
Oh, wow.
I'm telling
Even
you.
Egbert couldn't tear it apart.
He was perfect every day. He was perfect. He was the most consistent. Everybody has their down days and their up days, except Bobby Day. He never had a bad day. Never did. It's sort of like Dan Strauss. Dan Strauss, who now works for Rick and Tracy Ellis. Dan Strauss worked for me. I can tell you a Dan Strauss story that like the guy never gets upset, never gets mad, never gets bummed out or anything like that. You want to hear a quick, and to the point where I've told the story before, and I've told it on other radio stations before. People have called me and asked me about this.
Of course, I want to hear it.
Okay. Dan Strauss, when he was working for me in the Traffic Network days, Dan Strauss worked out of my office, okay? And we worked split shifts because we were traffic reporters. He worked mornings and he worked afternoons. And during the day, he was on the air, talking about long days. During the day, he was on the air at the old Kicks 104, which at the time was a country station, 104.1. And he was on the air, from in traffic reporting in the morning, in the afternoons, and then in the morning he'd leave, go over to Westport Plaza. They were in the Gold Tower at the time. He'd go do his shift then. He'd come back and work at my place for the afternoon shift. So he was having some marital problems, let's say. So one day, there's a knock at the door. And it was sort of weird because our office, the door was always open. You just walk in. Everybody walked in and out. And it so happened that I was walking by the front door of the office building at the time, and I heard this knock on the door. So I opened up the door, and there's a woman standing there. And she goes, "Hi, I'm Dan Strauss's wife." I go, "Hi, how you doing?" She says to me, "Where does Dan normally park?" And they were in the process of getting divorced at the time.
No.
And I said, "Where does he park? You mean like when he comes here?" "Oh, yeah, I know he's not here. I know he's at Kicks 104. But where does he park?" And I said, "Well, he parks back in the parking lot, usually like, third or fourth space back in the parking lot." "Okay." So she gets in her minivan, and we're all going like, okay. So I go back, and I tell a couple other people, I go, "Dan Strauss?"
Did she seem agitated?
No, she was like Miss Calm and collected.
Okay.
So we go back in the back part of the building where there's a window out to the parking lot, and we see her drive around in the back of the building to the parking lot, and she opens up the side of the minivan, the sliding door of the minivan, and proceeds to throw all his stuff on the parking lot. Clothes, his hockey equipment, because he was a real big hockey freak. He played hockey all the time, played amateur hockey. And she does all this and pulls her car back around the front of the building, knocks on the door again, and I answer the door. She goes, "Can you tell Dan I was by?" And I say, "No problem." So I called Dan at the other radio station at Kicks and say, "Dan, buddy, I hate to tell you this, but your wife was here." And he says, "My wife? What was my wife doing this?" "Well, all I can tell you is that your possessions and your clothing and your hockey stuff is all in the parking lot." And he goes, "What?" I go, "She showed up here at the radio station at our Traffic Network place and threw all the stuff in the parking lot." And he says, "Well, that dumb blah 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 blah," and he laughs about it. So he shows up here at the radio station. We help him, put some of the stuff in boxes, and we actually put some of the stuff in storage at the Traffic Network building, which ironically some of it is still there, if you can believe that or not. And then he proceeds to tell us the other story, and he's kidding about this. I mean, I'm going like, God, I would be crushed if my wife showed up at my place of employment. He tells us the story about one night he came home late. He was working, I don't know where he was working, and they had a detached garage that was like behind their house. And so in other words, the house sat up front, and you drove the drive windows in the back, and there's like a 2-car garage in back. And as he pulls around the corner and the headlights hit the garage, his wife is standing back there, and she's got all his hockey equipment in a big heap because he was a goalie. So he's got all these goalie pads and goalie sticks and all this stuff. Yeah. And it's in a heap, and she's spraying lighter fluid on it, and she's getting ready to start it on fire. And
oh, wow. Now, was that performative, or was she like actually going to do it?
Oh, no. She was going to. If he'd come home 5 minutes later, or like 2 minutes later, his stuff would have been in flames. And I'm going like, damn, boy, Dan, she's a Spitfire, but
boy, Brad, that's one way to describe bipolar personality disorder. Go ahead,
Dan, and he'd laugh about this kind of stuff. He'd always say, "Oh, that crazy, whatever," and he'd laugh about it. I go like,
so by the time that she showed up at the office, though, maybe he was so content. And maybe he took it so well because he realized that chapter of his life was ending, and he would hopefully be free of that. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, it was just sort of weird. I mean, once again.
And then today, Brad, if it was 2024, somebody would be there looking out the window and like capturing it on video and putting it on TikTok. And then a bunch of angry, short-haired women would be like putting it to some sassy Beyonce song and being like, you don't need no man. You dumping stuff out in the parking lot. Okay.
It's funny because first you see the video on doorbell camera where she came to the door at the at the building, and then you'd see 3 or 4 people jump out of the office with their phones, exactly. and walk up to her, in the parking lot. Hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm throwing everything out of my husband, and then they would have video of Dan showing up at work. There would be and it would all be in 60 seconds. It would be the perfect TikTok video,
or a YouTube short, and Brad Hildebrand would be watching it and supporting the metrics there.
Right, I'd be watching. Look at this poor guy.
And then people would be doing remixes to it. You can remix all those TikToks, and you can do a duet with them.
The crazy stuff that goes on in our life, isn't it crazy? I mean,
but did he end up being okay? Like, what's the epilogue to this story?
Well, he works. I think that was wife number 1. I think he's on, and I shouldn't say this about Dan. He's a nice guy. I think he's been remarried a couple times since then.
Okay, and his stuff is still at storage.
Yeah, and he works. See, it's sort of, and I'm sort of glad to see him get a promotion. He was like a producer working for Tracy. He was one of the first people they hired out at Real Talk 93.3, and he was behind the scenes guy. Now he's actually doing the morning show because
I've never met him. I don't know him.
They're on version 96 of the morning show. To the point. No, I mean sincerely. What's sort of interesting is, you look at and this is like me going into, this is if I put on my Graham Poopah hat and I do my radio poop thing again. Okay, we had the 3 talk stations that appeared within months of each other. We had
in 2019 2021, right?
Right, 2021. We had Real Talk 93.3. Tracy, that was the last one because she was supposed to be the first one, but every week was like, we're going to be on next week, and every week is going to be on next week, and that went on for like 4 months. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first one that hit the airwaves was Real Talk STL, or not Real News Talk STL. That's Jeff Allen. I used to call the J3, which originally was John Beck, Jeff Allen, and Joe Rush. They hit the airwaves first. Then it was The Patriot, which essentially it was Jamie Allman, and he went over with John Beck over to iHeart. And then the third one was Tracy Ellis. Okay, if you go back to Real Talk, our News Talk STL, the entire air staff, with the exception of one shift, is the same as the day it started on the air. They still have the exact same, shift from 5 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, with the exception of what's the news guy on Channel 4?
Larry Connors.
Larry Connors, who used to be on another station, and that station went away, and they hired him at News Talk STL. Okay, at The Patriot, it's exactly the same air schedule from the day they went on the air. Jamie Allman's on the air from 5 to 9. Then it's Glenn Beck.
I used to listen to him in the morning before our show started. I would listen to him in the morning.
Right. Then it's Glenn Beck, and then it's who is it? Glenn Beck, and then it's who's
some national lineup. Yeah.
Then it's Travis Clay, or Clay Travis, and Buck Sexton. And then in the afternoons, it's Sean Hannity, or early afternoons. Then the late afternoons, it was the guy from Dallas or Houston, wherever his name is. I can't remember his name. He's an ex-Marine guy. Okay.
I get it. Yep.
At 93.3, most of the shifts have turned over at least 46 times.
And why do you think that is, Brad? I'm sure you have an opinion on that.
It's Tracy. I mean, there were people that lasted literally 2 days. From, she talked about, we brought this person in. There was a lady that moved her family from Houston or some crazy thing like that. She got fired after day number 3 because Tracy was, and I'll say this up front, and, her attorney, once again, I'd be more than happy to get a cease and desist letter again from you. Tracy is a micromanager. And Tracy she thinks she's God's gift to the radio business. She knows everything there is to know about the radio business. And her deal was she didn't want to hire any radio people because, once again, her husband, Rick, sat across the table from me and said one day to my face, "We don't trust radio people." radio people are bad people. We don't trust radio people. And I said to him, I go, Rick, what are you trying to be? Aren't you trying to be we're not really radio people. We're a talk show. We're a talk show company. And everybody they hired, every single person they hired was like a YouTuber or a blogger or something like that. Every single person. And
now, with the exception of you used to work with Brian Nieves, and Nieves still has a show on there. So he was a radio guy.
No, but he wasn't. See, there's a story about that. I told her that she should hire Brian Nieves, and she says, I never heard of that. Who is that guy? And the funny thing was, like 6 months later, he's working there. But that was not the original hire. He was like in the afternoon.
He came on later.
Yeah, he was like, he came on 6 months later, which meant he was the 14th different show for that time period in 6 months. Anyway,
we got to talk about renewable energy and Tracy Ellis today, Brad. Like, it's a pretty good day.
Well, it's two of the same.
It's a pretty good Friday.
We need to go. Have a good weekend, John.
See you guys Monday.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?